Okay, so what I wanted to point out, and I'm really glad you just sent me those videos actually. So let's take a look first at where most people get pain with IT band syndrome. So it's going to be over on the side of the knee, as you're well aware of because you feel it. But there's a few different spots. So sometimes it is true IT band, sometimes it is hamstring, sometimes it is side of the joint. So it's really one of those, it's a catch-all term for lateral knee pain, side of the knee pain, to call it IT band syndrome. But for just example's sake, where you see, and this is your IT band here, where you see it come down and rub, I mean, it is essentially, there's a gap here and there's a little, it's called a bursa that lives right on the side. It's kind of like a fluid-filled sac that lives there. But that's really close to the side of the knee. You also have this hamstring that if you're looking from the back comes down and it crosses the outside of the knee and goes right down here to that little bone on the side of your kind of top of your lower leg. So there's definitely options of things that could be problematic down here. Your quad also comes down and can give you pain on the side of the knee. So it's definitely something where it could be IT band. The fact that you feel some tightness in your hip before things get real funky, it definitely could be more just true IT band discomfort. I just wanted to show you everything else that was involved in there. So when I was talking as far as, and I'm sure your other PT has gone through this, you have a few things that connect directly to your IT band. So your tensor fascia lata is this guy right here, the one that's yellow. It comes from the kind of more the front side of your hip and connects in. Then your glute max also has a direct tie into there. Your glute med actually shares some fibers up here. This doesn't show it quite as well, but it also connects down into your IT band. So when people say stretching your IT band, this true white part of it, you literally cannot stretch. They've done studies on it, but you can have an effect on the muscles above it. There are some fascial connections with the lateral part of your quad also. And then also a little bit of your hamstring has some attachments there as well. I want to show you underneath your IT band. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off a layer of muscle. So that is gone. So if you can see underneath where that just was, part of your quad, so where a minute ago it looked like, oh, it's next to it, it's really underneath it. So as far as foam rolling goes and things like that, I do not love for people to foam roll directly on top of their IT band. They generally will just smush it into the muscles underneath it and it just doesn't feel very good. So getting more on the front side on your actual glute and then a little bit more on the back side on your hamstring. So you got multiple parts of your hamstring. But getting behind your IT band is a little bit more tolerable, a little bit more effective. I also don't instruct a lot of true rolling. I'll have people get to a point that's really tender, hold on to that point a little bit until it seems to decrease some, anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds or so, then move to a different point. But things that I want to talk about in relation to the video that you just sent me. So, and it is super stinking common. The Q angle that I was telling you about is kind of how we look at whether the kneecap is going to be tracking in the correct way or not. Females in general, our hips are a little bit wider. That means the angle from here to your knee, then down to your ankle, can be a little bit more. So the Q angle is between these two lines. Sorry, it's a squiggly line. I don't have a mouse on this computer. When you have an increased angle here, what is going to happen, and I'm just going to clear the pen off, but what can happen is when that pull is at a bigger, more kind of pronounced angle, your kneecap in here has more pull coming this way, and there's just more friction that happens on the outside of the knee. So ways to fix that, as opposed to just, obviously we can't fix structural things and women have wider hips, but when you are talking glute strength and why PTs always suggest so much hip strengthening, when you have weakness on the side of your hip in your glute med or in your glute max, but in particular in your glute medius right here, what happens, and in your glute min, is that when you are trying to do that single leg squat, which is basically repeated a ton of times when you're running, instead of you squatting and this knee staying in a nice line directly over your second toe or so, it actually ends up angling in a little bit more than it needs to. When it angles in more than it needs to, everything ends up pulling on the side of your knee. So what I like for my runners to do is get comfortable with a single leg squat. And I know part of yours, I think, was a little bit of balance. You can totally hold on to a chair, a countertop, until you get your balance down. But working on feeling yourself engage your glutes on the side to keep your kneecap in line with, I like to say second toe, just because if I say big toe, sometimes people come a little bit more in than I want. But I say second toe just because that keeps a nice, pretty tracking right in front of the knee, reduces some of that pulling that is out here on the side. Okay, so that's one thing that we want to be aware of. I do feel like you have a little bit of weakness, not in a sense of true actual weakness, but as far as functionally being able to keep your hip level and not drop when you're running and your knee from dropping in, we want to think a little bit more consciously on firing these muscles when you're running. Super challenging. I stunk at it for a long time. I have to really, really think and feel, am I actually engaging my glutes when I'm running? Am I pushing back with my glutes powering it, or am I just controlled falling and lifting my hips up in the front? Okay, next thing I want to talk about, sorry this video is a little bit long, but I want to cover everything with you, is what can happen if you have a little bit of overpronating, which is going to be down in your arch here. Same kind of concept as far as adding a funky angle to your knee. Most knee issues in running actually stem from either the hip or they stem from the ankle. If you have flat feet, and I didn't get a look at your feet obviously, but if they're a little bit more flat and they tend to roll down, and I know you're in a zero drop at some point, meaning you're not having as much structural support from your heel side of things, but what can happen is if your arch is dropping too much, picture the angles of force here, right? So this is dropping in potentially too much. Your knee then starts to angle then a little bit more, even though it's already doing that from your hip. And then all of a sudden, everything culminates pressure right out here. So I just like to give people a visual so they can more so think when they're running. I think a lot of people mindlessly run. I used to be guilty of it. Now I have to really, really concentrate. And I now, knock on wood, am running pain-free right now, but I definitely understand it's very frustrating. So that is what I wanted to show you. I'm going to throw your squat up here. And then while we're looking at your squat, as you can see, when you're going down, you get a little wiggle in the knee, and it's not super stable. Some of that, like I said, is balance. Some of that is just going to be a little bit of hip weakness. So that's why I really want you to work on single leg control. So we're going to switch your home exercise program a little bit, but hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if you would like to know anything else about as far as anatomy goes. The only other thing that I may have you add in is actually working with a tennis ball or something of the sorts on these muscles down here. Sometimes when people run, these actually overfire a little bit. So if you ever get kind of tired feeling down on the side of your shin, they also have a little attachment up here, and when they're pulling, they can also irritate. So if you can kind of see, this attaches, we'll add another layer of ligaments down here. Everything is generally attached, it's just not direct, but that's another muscle that can get a little overfiring. So when you're working tennis ball, we're going to be working glute med, we're going to be working on your tensor fascia lata, which is this guy. And we're just going to work on very, very mindfully using your glutes when you are running.